my name's Paul Arnold, sometimes known as the Stuttering Professor. I'm a strategist, I'm a facilitator, and I'm a trainer. And as you can see, I've read quite a few books, hasten to all of them. And today I want to talk about this book, Drive. The surprising truth about what motivates us, by Daniel H. Pink. I don't know what the H stands for. So actually, the book in a nutshell is that rewards don't work and that people are more motivated by internal factors than by external drivers. And whilst we often think that financial, bonuses and things is a motivator, it's been shown that it isn't really. It's primarily a demotivator when you've got very low amount of money. But then once you get a certain amount of money, after that, it loses its real edge. And he talks what I call the map. He says there are three fundamental drivers of what makes us, be motivated. They are mastery, autonomy, and purpose. So let's sort of dig into the book in a little bit more detail. There's a view that many managers and leaders have a belief that extrinsic motivators work as they see them as a useful way to control people. Now there's a lot of evidence these days that would suggest that actually they don't really provide that long-term performance improvements that these managers and leaders would really hope for. So why this carrot and stick approach no longer really works? Well, the first thing is that the workplace has radically changed. When Taylor in the 1900s, was sort of doing this sort of observational stuff and working upon how to drive increasing compliance and performance levels, they sort of saw workers as part of a complicated machine, another cog. And therefore, it was very much about how do you oil the wheels of that place through reward and punishment. And sadly, that metaphor still dominates the way that many companies manage their people. But, I said the workplace has radically changed. It's more like, shall we say, a metaphor of being an organism. There's massive increase in complexity. There's a reduction in management levels, and there's a change in corporate focus. There's a massive increase in low profit limited liability companies such as L3Cs and in the UK B Corps. And the reality of what really drives behaviour is emotional connections, and a greater understanding of what motivates us than purely rational decision making, because that's not the way that we really do make many of the decisions in life. And people make decisions more upon internal factors than external ones. And so basically we've got to really learn what makes us really tick, and then we can actually make sure that we become much better as that. And as Fry writes, it's inconceivable that people are motivated solely or even mainly by external incentives. We've got to find the internal ones. So in the book it talks about the 7 deadly flaws of extrinsic motivators. The first thing is that that they extinguish intrinsic motivators. Once you get a basic threshold level, carrots and sticks can achieve the opposite of their intended aims. Extrinsic rewards kill intrinsic rewards. The reward becomes the key reason to do something and destroys the fundamental intrinsic enjoyment of the task itself. And they talk about quite a few cases in the book. So Leopard, Nisbet and Green in 1978 was looking at preschool kids. And they had a number of different groups. And group 1 was told in advance they would get a reward if they did these drawings. Another group, however, were promised nothing, and they didn't receive anything. And 2 weeks later, when the room was laid out with paper and pens during their free play period, those who had been in the reward group drew less than the other group. So actually, it stopped them doing something because it now became a reward. And also it can diminish performance, especially in the long run. Research has shown that extrinsic rewards caps growth. If bonus to achieve 10% growth, then why bother pushing for 15%? I'll save that for next year. And Deci in 69 discovered that if an incentive is no longer offered, it can lead to a reduction in commitment to the task, because now we're demotivated. Furthermore, they can crush creativity. Bonuses, etc., drive a functional fixatedness, where they're focused on delivering the action that will give them the reward. And it therefore prevents them thinking wider and doing what maybe is the right thing to go and do. And therefore, it reduces the potential of creativity and proper, business problem solving. And, for example, artists commissioned to do work for people to set briefs, against a set amount of money, often produce less creative work than when given greater free rein. And also it can crowd out good behaviour. Psychologists have studied parents in the childcare group, which require the children to be picked up at 4 p.m. And they found that when a fine was imposed for late pickups, the number of offences doubled, because it basically moved it from being a moral guilt, oh, those poor teachers, I must get there in time to let them go home. It now became a financial transaction. I'm buying their time, and therefore that's okay. And we also know that these bonusings can encourage cheating, shortcuts and unethical behaviour. And the heavier the bonus that gets given, the more likely you're going to get compromised, and you're going to get those ethics are going to be sort of broken. And so we saw with Enron and various other cases going on. And also they become addictive. And it's a bit like drug taking, the same amount of bonus you get given loses its motivational impact, requiring an even larger sum to be paid. And as I said before, when withdrawn, it leads to a slump in behaviour. And they can also foster short-term thinking. Research have found that companies that spend the most time guiding quarterly earnings deliver significantly lower long-term growth rates than other companies that do not. So actually, by putting bonuses, on a very short-term basis, we're taking our eye upon the bigger long-term gain that we should really be focusing on. Now, let's talk about extrinsic and intrinsically driven people. And Pink defines two types of people. The type X, the extrinsic, are primarily driven by external factors such as money, fame, status, symbols. And they can often be highly successful, but can be troubled by an insatiable appetite for more stuff. However, type Is are intrinsic motivation, coming from within to accomplish something more meaningful to them, not to other people. And they've been shown to have higher self-esteem, better interpersonal relationships, and greater physical and mental well-being. So type 1s have been shown to usually outperform the type X in the long run. So type 1 behaviour is fueled by three factors. That's purpose, mastery and autonomy. I shape them around a bit to say mastery, autonomy and purpose, but I get why purpose comes first. So let's look at this. Purpose. To have passion behind a meaningful purpose makes us much more motivated and engaged. It makes sense. And to have your, to quote the book, to have your why is really powerful. And what's the thing you're striving to go and do? And talks in the book how, these great sort of American presidents had their whys. Abraham Lincoln's was to preserve the Union and free the slaves. Franklin Roosevelt's was about lifting, the country out of depression and helping them to win the World War. So the question in the book is, what is your one sentence? What is your, why? To quote Simon Sinek. And a lack of, having an inspiring purpose at work is key, because the issue is that many organisations don't have a motivating purpose. And as Gary Hemmel states, as an emotional catalyst, wealth maximisation lacks the power to fully mobilise human energies. I don't care how much the company's really making. I want to know I'm doing something that is of worth to me, and maybe for the company, and maybe for the world. But Money isn't going to be the motivator. You know, and then we've got the changing demands of the new generation, the Gen Ys, the Gen Zs, the Gen Alphas, etc., are all demanding much more corporate social responsibility. They want to know they're working for someone and for an organization that's trying to have purpose-driven activities. And we certainly know that, you know, purpose drives teams. Teams naturally form around sort of around a leader who people want to follow. And very often that leader has a burning mission, purpose. It's, you know, they're trying to take him to this place and everyone says, I love that, that's where I want to go, I'll follow you there. Let's talk about mastery. And there's this idea, we all have an innate desire to grow and develop, to become better versions of who we are. And this mastery leads to a sense of personal fulfillment. I have become a better human being. And there's even mastery even for sort of normal jobs. You know, they did some sort of research. You know, Rosensky and Dutton studied hospital cleaners, nurses and hairdressers and found that many of them were finding areas of personal mastery that engaged them at work. So whatever level of job you're doing, you can still find something you're trying to get better at. And Pink talks about 3 laws of mastery. That mastery is a mindset. You know, it's what people believe shapes what they can achieve. And this builds all the work that Carol Dweck has done about, you know, about the growth mindset. And also, you know, but take off another book, you know, mastery takes grit to push through, you know, all the ups and downs about whenever you try and master something. And also the critical thing is total mastery is never fully achieved. And that's his power. It's not his fault, it's his power, because that what keeps people pushing constantly on. You know, a personal reference, you know, I am a rower, and basically you never master rowing. It's like golf, you never master. And therefore that's what keeps you coming back for more and more and more, because you're trying to get slightly closer to this goal that one can never actually fully reach. Then let's go on to the last one, autonomy. You know, studies have shown that perceived control is an important component of one's happiness. And actually the converse, lack of free will and lack of choice reduces a person's vitality and happiness. And certainly as a psychotherapist, I know I spend a lot of time working to help people realize they have greater choice in their life, because when they feel they have no choice and they have to do what is going on and staying where they are, that is what gives them that levels of depression, of hopelessness and helplessness. And this idea of having a sense of autonomy has a powerful effect on performance, on attitude, mindset, in other words, job satisfaction, and causes less stress and less burnout. You know? Cornell University studied 320 small companies, half of which had granted their people autonomy. And these businesses grew at 4 times the rate of growth of the control-orientated companies. So let go and they will shoot high. And the interesting thing it says in this book is that it's not just autonomy over the big things, it's about the small things as well. And in many ways it's easier to give them autonomy over the small things. So, you know, my view of the book, I think it's very interesting and very enjoyable. And I'm sort of left wondering what had really been added from the work that Maslow had said back in 1943 or Hertzberg had said in 1959. And the trouble with all these books is there's very little real peer review. It's not like in the scientific arena where, you know, books are really, and papers are challenged a lot even before they get published. You know, so there isn't really as much depth about really pulling these books apart and saying, like, are we really hearing, you know, a proper version of how those findings are being presented, you know? So we've got to be aware that, you know, there'll always be other pieces of research that maybe concludes something else. So maybe we shouldn't swallow whole everything all these books say. And, you know, we assume we all want autonomy. And I think, you know, that may be a very Western approach. And we may need to consider there may be some other cultures and some other people actually don't want to have that. So we shouldn't apply one rule to all, I think is the critical thing. But overall, you know, like many of these books, you know, very readable, lots of good anecdotes in the book. But I think, you know, you've got the gist of it from this. So I hope that helps.